What are you buying?
Way too many damn copies of this game. Oh, hey, sorry, I'm going away for a little bit soon, so I wanted to make sure I'm properly packed. I'll do it later. What do you say we get this show on the road, because it's honestly taken me forever to get to this game. Resident Evil 4 is not only the game that greatly changed things up for the series, not only is it still lauded to this day as one of the best games ever made, but perhaps one of the most influential games of all time. And yeah, man, I've been playing Resident Evil 4 since it all began in 2005 for the Nintendo GameCube. It's this one that got me into the Resident Evil series in the first place after being totally unaware, and it was one of the first mature games I ever got to experience for myself because I wasn't old enough to play stuff like Grand Theft Auto just yet. I was only 10 at the time, but I remember my dad getting Resident Evil 4 during its initial launch, playing for a bit, and then was like, "Here son, why don't you give it a try?" To which I was like, "What? I can play this?" It was nothing I had ever seen before, same for a lot of people actually, as this was the game that put third-person shooters on the map. I can't confirm if it was the first game to introduce the third-person over-the-shoulder camera that we now know like the back of our hands, but RE4 is definitely one of the games you immediately think of whenever that question's asked. But that was only part of what made me so amazed about this game back in the day. Using some extremely satisfying gunplay, I was exploding the heads off of enemies like watermelons, some of which had parasitic creatures popping out of them and were more deadly than ever, and the violence in general was all very new to me. Now, I wasn't exactly a total stranger to blood and gore as a child. I did do some multiplayer with my dad and my younger siblings on games like Quake 3 and Unreal Tournament 2004, but I never experienced a purely solo campaign with a story and characters that expanded the more you played. This style of gameplay was so new to me, in fact, that I lost plenty of times trying to figure out how everything worked. That opening chapter where you try to survive as long as you can against endless waves of ganados before the church bell rings gives you a pretty good idea as to what you're getting yourself into. It goes on for a while too, and if you try grabbing the shotgun, your ass better be prepared to face Dr. Salvador and his scary looking instant death chainsaw. I sadly didn't finish the GameCube original until much later within the next several years. The first time I completed Resident Evil 4 was actually with the 2007 Wii version, which I'll talk more about in a bit. Even after 18 years of playing this game at the time of this video across several different platforms, Resident Evil 4 still remains as not only one of my favorite titles in the franchise, but one of my favorite games of all time. And I'm not kidding when I say I played this game a lot of times on multiple consoles. I don't think I own so many copies of a single game than I have with Resident Evil 4. It's kind of become my lifelong goal to own as many different versions as I can. Now obviously I do have the GameCube original, but I also have this version, and this version, and this version, and this version, and this version. Please don't judge me. The only ones I'm currently missing are the PS2 and Oculus Rift ports. Well, okay, I technically don't have the two Xbox versions either, but I don't feel the need to buy two consoles I won't be playing with otherwise. I haven't heard great things about the PS2 version anyway, despite introducing some extra side content in the form of two modes dedicated to Ada Wong from Resident Evil 2. The textures are apparently more muddy and pixelated than the GameCube original, frame rates taking a hit, and load times are utterly horrendous. As far as I know, it's the worst version of Resident Evil 4 that you can buy, outside of that wonky mobile port that I don't think even exists anymore. The Oculus Rift version actually looks pretty good though. I wish I had the money to buy one of those, and more importantly, a bigger reason to have it. But if I do pick one up, I'm definitely making this a high priority. The Sphere Hunter briefly talks about her experiences with the Oculus port, so I suggest watching her video if you're curious. My initial plan was to simply play the PC version for this video. No real reason, I just hadn't completed that one yet, but I'm very much glad I did, because as of recently in late 2022, the Resident Evil 4 HD project was finally finished. This is a mod created by an amazing dedicated group of fans to truly upgrade the visuals for modern hardware, including textures, menus, menus, everything, and my god, it looks fantastic. Straight out of a late PS3, early PS4 title. These same folks even provided GameCube button prompts if you want to use an unofficial controller adapter and play like it's 2005 again. Without the mod, the game still looks fine, but even in 1440p it is noticeably a little blurry, and stuff like the health meter is extremely pixelated. It was perhaps too old of a game for Capcom to fix properly. Maybe they didn't want to do the Bethesda thing and keep updating the game to the point that more things break. And bear in mind that this is what's dubbed the Ultimate HD Edition, because the original 2007 PC version had about the same amount of problems as the PS2 version and was horrible to play with. I can't even imagine attempting this game with a mouse and keyboard, it must feel so awkward. The Ultimate HD Edition unfortunately didn't come out until 2014, that's 7 long years to wait for what really should be called the It Actually Works Edition. I decided to leave the game mod free for my initial run to be as authentic as I can for this video, then put it on as soon as I did the Ada side missions, and man, talk about a difference in quality. I didn't go back afterwards because the HD project was just that spectacular, and I really have to applaud the fans who made this for sticking to the end when they could have easily scrapped this entire thing because it took so long to finish. Though it wasn't just that, which went through a pretty lengthy development period. Resident Evil 4 in of itself had quite a few different versions that would end up getting thrown away. Version numero uno was directed by Hideki Kamiya, now of Platinum Games, and the one who also directed Resident Evil 2 back in 1998. He wanted to take this sixth installment in a whole different direction than what we had previously by making it more cool and stylish, which if you know Hideki Kamiya and Platinum Games, you can imagine the sort of vision he had in mind. It was a valid effort, but Capcom producer and Resident Evil creator Shinji Mikami felt that Kamiya perhaps went a bit too far from the series' roots with his idea, and persuaded the staff to do something else. Kamiya would even take his initial concept and put it in the first Devil May Cry game, which was most likely what the original version of Resident Evil 4 was gonna be. And I'm honestly glad it didn't go that way. I love Devil May Cry, don't get me wrong, but that was by no means what Resident Evil was all about. So all of that labor ended up being wasted, and another version was in the works by late 2001, now being directed by Hiroshi Shibata, the same man who would eventually be the lead game designer for some of the big Platinum titles like Bayonetta, The Wonderful 101, and Astral Chain. This was the point where Resident Evil 4 got announced as part of the Capcom 5 during E3 of 2002. Capcom made a deal with Nintendo to produce 5 games exclusively for the brand new GameCube. Those games being Beautiful Joe, Killer 7, Piano 3, Dead Phoenix, and lastly Resident Evil 4. In the final release of RE4, there's even a powerful magnum you can purchase later in the game called Killer 7, same logo and everything. That's pretty neat. The second iteration of Resident Evil 4 was known as the Fog version simply because it was more about the returning Leon Kennedy from RE2 surviving a black deadly fog that kept showing up, all whilst being infected with the progenitor virus from Zero, which gave his left hand a hidden ability. On top of some first-person elements added to the mix, there was also apparently a different female character that Leon would encounter instead of Ashley Graham like the version we ended up getting, but we never found out who exactly it was before the Fog version got cancelled too, with only 40% of it completed. A third attempt at making this damn game got showcased in E3 of 2003, with this one being titled Maboroshi no Biohazard 4, or The Phantom Biohazard 4 when translated to English. Development at first was going pretty smoothly, and Shinji Mikami claimed that this was going to be scarier than ever compared to previous titles. This time Leon had caught some strange disease that made him start seeing bizarre imagery like animated suits of armor, living dolls, and even ghosts. Eternal Darkness had been out for about a year at this point, so I wouldn't be surprised if Capcom tried doing something similar to that. One particular ghost with a hook would frequently chase Leon around like Nemesis and Mr. X, which is why most people call this the Hookman version for being such a huge presence. The game still used fixed camera angles for navigating, but this was where the now famous third-person over-the-shoulder angle made its appearance in Resident Evil 4, complete with a laser sight used for better aiming. As awesome as this version sounded, it too unfortunately got deleted and Capcom had to start over yet again. This time just sticking to what they knew best by including zombies, but everyone was starting to feel very fatigued with how formulaic the series was getting. And to Shinji Mikami, and to some degree myself as well, it especially showed with Resident Evil 0 not having many ideas left. Some Capcom staff even got so bored with Resident Evil that they left to do other projects. Boy, they must be really regretting that decision now. At this rate, Mikami was probably thinking if you want something done right, you gotta do it yourself. So we kicked Hiroshi Shibata out of the director's chair and decided to shake things up for the franchise, writing up a whole new story in just 3 weeks due to time constraints and changing the tone from survival horror to an action B-movie style. The staff were pretty cautious and a bit worried as to how that would turn out, but Mikami stuck to his guns in more ways than one and convinced everyone to go with it anyway, on top of making Resident Evil 4 seem more accessible to newcomers without any prior knowledge of the other games, and that's definitely reflected on the story. There's very little continuity between this game and older titles outside of a few references. The 4 in the name is mostly for marketing reasons, and newbies to Resident Evil would still want to play it because it's on the hot new GameCube, and only for the GameCube, for about 9 months before it came over to the PlayStation 2 with a brand new gun you unlock by beating the hardest difficulty, an additional costume you can unlock for Leon and Ashley, as well as the Ada side chapters I mentioned earlier. Although every other version of the game nowadays has these features, so apart from nostalgia and collection purposes, there's not much reason to own the GameCube original anymore with its missing content, and the PS2 version's probably not recommended either because of its technical issues. I will say the GameCube controller does work splendidly for Resident Evil 4, since despite the different camera angle, 10 controls are still very much a thing, and what would probably turn off newcomers today is the fact that you can't move and shoot at the same time. I think it's easy enough to get used to, and the game is suitably designed around it, but then again I had played Resident Evil 4 since it first launched, so I do have years and years of experience, and a lot of it could just be muscle memory. It's likely how longtime Tomb Raider fans feel whenever I talk about the controls for the classic games. Future ports of Resident Evil 4 mostly follow the GameCube's control setup, trying its best to replicate shooters of today, but still unable to move whilst aiming, on top of needing to hold down a run button like previously when an analog stick is usually more than capable without. If you want the best control for this game though, you pick up the Wii version, where instead of a laser sight you have a full-on pointer that you can aim anywhere you want and as quickly as you can react. It's super accurate too and perfect for roundhouse kicking guys in a bathroom. You can shoot things much faster than you ever could do on other versions, and some folks to this day still swear by the Wii port as the preferred way to play Resident Evil 4. I can definitely see why, and it's dirt cheap alongside this, but gotta say, blowing up the picture on more modern TVs is a bit of a visual mess, so either play on a monitor or get yourself a smaller TV.
Actually, why don't I do that for the GameCube version? You know what? Let's set this bad boy up. Now we're playing like it's 2005.
Basically, there's more than enough ports of the game to choose from, meaning there's absolutely no excuse as to why you can't play this. And play it you should, because it's really friggin' awesome. But I guess I should cover the story first before we get into the meat and potatoes of Resident Evil 4. And I'll leave a timecode to skip my thoughts on it for those who are currently going through the remake that arrived not too long ago with this time, and want to save themselves from spoilers of an 18-year-old plot.
Resident Evil 4.
6 years have passed since the events of Resident Evil 2, and one of the main protagonists of the game, Leon Kennedy, comes back for this story, but has been given one hell of a promotion between rookie cop who couldn't even get through his first day on the force, to a government agent working for the US president. Survive a zombie apocalypse and you're pretty much set for life, I suppose. Oh, and Umbrella just so happens to have gotten themselves bankrupt after it was proven in court that they were responsible for the virus outbreak. Sort of how it would realistically go, but a bit of an anticlimactic way to bring them to justice. It was likely intended to be that way as another means of rebooting the series, so to speak, and new players didn't have to worry about what Umbrella was going to do next. Leon's first job is to search and rescue the president's daughter, Ashley Graham, who was kidnapped by a strange cult that speaks Spanish, but it's never explained where exactly this all takes place. I can only guess that it's supposed to be some undisclosed location in Spain or a different European country altogether. I'm not really sure, particularly given how these people live. Leon also gets a bit of support from Ingrid Hunnigan as he checks out the area and its locals, who seem civil enough at first, just keeping to themselves, but they're not so friendly when it comes to new faces as they all try to kill Leon, and that's mostly because these people have been injected with Las Plagas, a parasite that starts off as an egg but eventually grows into a newborn that squirms inside your body. Everyone with Las Plagas is also sworn to a sect known as the Los Illuminados, and the villagers are led by their chief, Mendez, where at one point he captures Leon and puts him with another ex-cop from Madrid named Luis Serra, who's caught up in a very similar mess. After freeing themselves from the villagers, Luis makes his escape, and upon more exploring, Leon does manage to find Ashley inside a locked church.
Oh my god, we just saw you! How are you in trouble already?
As Leon and Ashley try leaving the church, they briefly get stopped by the main antagonist of RE4, Osmond Sadler, the head of Los Illuminados. His master plan, which he explains in great detail to Leon by the way, involves placing Las Plagas inside of Ashley and then sending her back to the president so that the parasite can hatch and break out like a chest burst or an alien, where an infestation can then occur. Sadler even managed to put one inside of Leon whilst he was unconscious, so now it's not just a matter of getting Ashley home safely, but also removing both of their parasites. Why, though, would Sadler reveal so much information right on the spot like that? Leon and Ashley were none the wiser before he opened his big mouth that doesn't seem to have teeth in it. You could have just let them return to the US and watch the world burn afterwards. Or, you know, just kill Leon there and then so that he doesn't help Ashley anymore. There's a lot of ways Sadler's plan could have been successful, but he's blabbed too much and now Leon and Ashley are highly alert and paranoid about the Las Plagas inside of them, furthering their motivation to get it out. Well done. The two manage to evade Sadler for now, but the Ganados keep hindering their escape options like blowing away their evac chopper, surrounding a nearby house where we fight alongside Luis before he ditches us again, or Chief Mendez challenging us in a boss fight that Leon inevitably wins. This leads to Leon and Ashley trying to seek sanctuary inside a castle along their travels, but that too seems to be overrun with Ganados, now with religious robes and are just as crazy as their neighbors in the village. This batch, however, is run by Ramon Salazar, who was given a special kind of plagas by Sadler to control the others and act as second in command, which ended up heavily increasing his age as a result. He looks like an old man, but in reality he's 20 years old, though still a force to be reckoned with by using his many traps and lackeys to try and stop Leon from taking Ashley any further. Ashley manages to fall into one of Salazar's traps, with Leon having to find another way to get to her, and on his way he encounters Ada Wong, back from the dead after Resident Evil 2, but they seem to talk as if they met sometime in between games, since Leon doesn't react much about seeing Ada again after witnessing her drop into a bottomless pit last time. I don't know if there's maybe some other bit of source material that further elaborates on this, but it's always been something I felt was a little clumsy. Like, I understand that this game is meant to attract both old and new players to Resident Evil, but giving some sort of context about Leon's and Ada's developed relationship could have helped to some capacity, because otherwise you're not given much to work with outside of the ending where Leon vaguely tells Ashley that Ada's like a part of him he can't get rid of. What are you even talking about? You two did not know each other that well in the second game. Your fates can't be that intertwined, or whatever destiny bullshit you think is going on. The most we know about what's going on with Ada in Resident Evil 4 is that she's looking for a sample of Las Plagas that Leon figures out is for Albert Wesker. Because yeah, apparently they're working together too. When the hell did that happen? No idea, but if you play the extra chapter separate ways, which focuses entirely on Ada's side of the story, you'll see that the sample's going to the organization she actually works for while Wesker simply gets a fake. Ada escapes for the time being, and further on, Luis even comes back with a sample of Las Plagas as well as pills to temporarily suppress Ashley's and Leon's parasites, but ends up getting killed by Sadler via tentaculo hentai. Sadler unfortunately snags the sample and again doesn't just kill Leon right there, but rather leaves it up to Salazar to deal with him because I guess his robes need dry cleaning. I don't know, I'm trying to think of all these excuses as to why Sadler simply doesn't finish the job like he did with Luis, and nothing's working. Well, with Luis's dying breath, he fesses up to Leon that he's the one who researched Las Plagas and was hired by Sadler, but wanted out when he discovered what it was really going towards, hoping to right his wrongs by handing a sample over to the US government to try and find a cure. Leon vows vengeance for Luis, and coincidentally, Ashley's in the same room, so he's able to free her and she can go through her own little gameplay section before reuniting with Leon. Only to get captured again shortly after by Salazar's Nova Stardors that take her away to a ritual at the top of the castle. Leon sadly doesn't make the ritual in time though, and Ashley's now being taken away to an island, with Salazar blocking the exits by fusing with the Queen Plaga behind him, but Leon uses enough firepower to put him in his place, killing off Spanish Napoleon. Ada assists Leon immediately after by using a boat to drive him over to the island where Ashley's currently being held hostage, and there isn't much that happens once you get here. Sure, there's memorable moments, but not a whole lot is added to the overall story. Leon comes across more people infested with Las Plagas, only more dangerous than ever. He runs into the Regenerators, one of the most deadly creatures in the game, kills Sadler's pet creature that he just calls It. Then he rescues Ashley yet again as they mow down enemies with a bulldozer that to this day I have absolutely no clue how Ashley knows to control it. Near the end of the game, Leon basically goes to war with the Ganados with some help from Mike the Chopper Man, before he eventually gets blown up. Poor Mike the Chopper Man. But probably the most important thing that happens is meeting with Jack Krauser. Who's this guy? Dunno, and I don't think the game really cares either. Much like with Ada, I'm not sure if there's some narrative elsewhere that further explains who Krauser is and how he knows Leon so well. I think Darkside Chronicles goes a little more into it, but I've not played that game, so don't quote me on it. As for Resident Evil 4, the best we've got is that they were former comrades at some point or another. Krauser's responsible for kidnapping Ashley and died in a helicopter crash 2 years ago. Which crash? Your guess is as good as mine. And he's now within the same organization as Ada and also under orders from Wesker as well as Sadler. After introducing him to us, Ashley gets captured once more, this time by Sadler controlling her mind from the Las Plagas inside growing bigger. And Krauser's eventually taken care of by Leon after another boss fight against him and his mutated kitchen knife, which still pleases Sadler since he was onto him anyway and didn't care who died between him or Leon. With the Ganados basically done for, Leon and Ashley use this machine they locate to finally destroy the parasites inside them, and all that's left to do is beat Sadler himself as he turns into his true form, which honestly isn't quite as creative as some of the other bosses we've seen in this game, and he's a bit smaller too. The Salazar boss fight was ridiculously easy, but even he had a scarier design than Sadler does. It's just a spider dangling his human body underneath. It's kinda goofy in a way. As a nice little callback to Resident Evil 2, Ada throws Leon a rocket launcher, blasting Sadler out of the sky in true Resident Evil fashion. The team-up ends pretty short though, as Ada forces Leon to hand over the Las Plagas sample Sadler kept after killing Luis. How the hell did that not shatter? Oh, whatever. She escapes via helicopter, leaving the fate of Las Plagas for another sequel, and Leon and Ashley escape the island via jet ski with no more threats stopping the two from returning home. That's it, that's the story of Resident Evil 4. It's pretty simple, easy to follow, and an overall great starting point for new players who hadn't experienced Resident Evil before, barely tying back to the other entries and being more of its own thing, with an overall goal of having to rescue a damsel in distress. A classic video game setup as old as time, but works very effectively on most occasions, and this one's no exception. It is definitely more over the top than previous titles, and don't get me wrong, they have their silly moments too, but Resident Evil 4 is next level with how insane it can get. There's all kinds of crazy shenanigans going on, like battling a giant man-eating fish with nothing but harpoons, and a roar I seriously love when he's charging at you. Oh, that is so good. There's also minecart rides inside a castle, taking down Leatherface, 2 boulder chases ripped right out of Indiana Jones, utterly impossible moves Leon pulls off whilst dodging lasers a la the Matrix, and there's one part where you're running away from a giant Salazar robot statue that comes to life. It is all completely ridiculous, and most of the time Resident Evil 4 is not that scary a game, but it is very self-aware and knows full well not to take itself seriously, so why not go all the way with it and have fun? The campiness has been cranked up significantly, even more so than the old days where yeah, those could get quite cheesy too, sometimes quite laughable, but it could also get a little disturbing with the grotesque imagery. Resident Evil 4 wanted to be more action oriented and went all out with it to make Leon look like the most badass mofo this series has ever seen, and not to mention the acting's fairly good this time, some of the best performances in the entire series. Paul Mercer is Leon Kennedy to me, and up to now I don't think anyone else comes close to matching his delivery on the one-liners Leon spouts that are so damn corny, yet Mercer somehow still makes it work. Leon may be more experienced than his extraordinarily brief time in RCPD, but he's more confident than ever and full of wisecracks that range from enjoyably lame to full-on groaners.
No way, Leon.
Way? I knew you'd be fine if you landed on your butt.
Although Leon might be a little bit sexist at a couple of points, whether he's hitting on Hunnigan during the post-credit scene, calling Ashley sweetheart during the escape sequence, or straight up saying he doesn't follow a lady's orders.
Put your hands where I can see them.
Sorry, but following a lady's lead just isn't my style.
Yeah, that's probably one of the parts of Resi 4 that's aged the worst. But Leon is such a lovable dork otherwise that I can't stay mad at him for long. I've wanted that jacket of his for many years too, but you lose it so early on, and I wish it was a costume option for New Game Plus. I wonder how much it goes for. Holy sh... Well, I guess that university debt can wait. This is one of my favorite incarnations of Leon as a character, no matter how much of a cheesy action hero he's become. I'll at least respect him for turning down Ashley's offer for sex during the ending, but yeah, I suppose we should talk about her too. You're either gonna really hate this character, or... actually, I don't think there's anything in between. Alright, to be fair, I don't absolutely despise Ashley, not nowadays anyway. If you asked me when the game came out, I would have told you she was the pits. And if I did have one major criticism with the story of Resident Evil 4, it's with how repetitive saving Ashley gets in the long run. You have to rescue her like 4 different times throughout the entire plot. Once to kick the game off, twice when she gets caught in one of Salazar's traps, thrice when she gets taken away by Salazar's insects not long after, and Thrice when Sadler brainwashes her to join in temporarily. The frustration does build up and makes you question if rescuing Ashley is even worth it since she could barely defend herself, which I'll go more into during the gameplay stuff. Ungrateful she's not consistently thirsty for Leon minus the ending, and Ashley as a person doesn't quite get under my skin as much as she used to. Like, to me it doesn't get any worse than Steve fucking Burnside from Code Veronica, you know what I'm saying? And yeah, it would be criminal for me not to mention that she's also voiced by Carolyn Lawrence, or as you'll most likely know her, Sandy Cheeks from SpongeBob SquarePants and Cindy Vortex from Jimmy Neutron. I shit you not. Bet you can't tell, can ya?
I see that the president's equipped his daughter with ballistics, too.
How rude! And I don't believe there's any relevance with my figure and my standing.
No lasso tricks here though. Ashley is just a walking, talking MacGuffin that everybody needs, including Sadler, who I thought was going to be a pretty generic villain at first, but he ended up greatly averting my expectations. Every time Leon comes with a quip, Sadler usually has something witty to say right back to him and vice versa. And I love how they're both constantly fighting to get the last word in, sometimes even highly amusing Sadler. It may not make him the deepest of characters, but it's very entertaining to watch. Salazar, oh my word, how could you not laugh your ass off at this guy? He has a high-pitched voice, a small stature for his age, and come on, just look at him. My favorite part's gotta be seeing him scurry off after activating a trap for Leon and Ashley like he just pulled a prank on them. He may not do a lot of fighting, and unfortunately the boss battle against him is a cakewalk, but I always look forward to it because it's so gratifying to finally take him down after being such a nuisance for so long. Now Krauser, he's definitely the weakest character of the lot, and that might be because he comes in way too late and it's not terribly long until we reach his boss battle, killing any chance of making him more interesting. He just has a really bland personality and I don't care at all what his backstory is or what he's all about. My first impression of him was that low. Billy Cohen from Zero had more intrigue than Krauser does.
But I'm acting as if the writing's what drew me into Resident Evil 4 in the first place, and it certainly helped. I greatly enjoy the absurdity of it all, much like the other games, but it was definitely the gameplay that got me hook, line, and sinker, so why don't we start discussing that now?
Previously, Resident Evil games would want you to use your brain and navigation skills and only brute force to take down zombies and other creatures that obstructed your way. In this one, throw that crap out the window because we're going in guns blazing. Yes, there is a lot of shooting in Resident Evil 4, more than any other title in the series at this point in time, with tank controls no less and still having to hold down a run button whilst being able to activate a 180-degree turn. But I wouldn't say the combat's necessarily mindless. There's plenty of obstacles and routes that require strategic thinking, and not every scenario is going to be exactly the same. During one moment you could be trying to survive a never-ending onslaught of Ganados. At another moment you may need to decide which path to take between two chainsaw sisters or a giant troll called El Gigante, maybe even do both for more rewards if you're feeling brave enough. And in another moment you could be riding a minecart, giving you more limited space and having to make sure you don't get knocked off by oncoming planks of wood. Resident Evil 4 may not be as scary as the classic games, but that's not to say there isn't tension to be had that gradually ramps up. The enemies start off simple enough as they walk slowly towards Leon but come in great numbers, though later on you'll encounter bugs that know how to camouflage, parasites that come out of people's heads that can do some serious damage if they get too close, and then you have the regenerators during the final chapters. Try as you might, you can't kill them through normal methods because their bodies have a fast healing rate. It's not until you find a thermal scope for your sniper rifle that you can see the weak points and take them down. Having that in mind, as well as their constant heavy breathing, the regenerators become one of the more terrifying enemies in the series yet. The mini-bosses can be pretty intimidating too. I already mentioned Dr. Salvador at the beginning of this video, but Salazar's castle also has these dudes called Garradors that can't see but are still able to hear you, lest you want to be pierced with their giant Wolverine claws. And near the end of the game, there's just straight up a man with a Gatling gun named JJ. It's not like RE4's continuous action with no breaks though. You're still given downtime to explore between arenas for more ammo and other stuff you can find, like the new yellow herbs that can permanently extend your new health meter when mixed up with a green or red herb. And never ever 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 use them on Ashley. She does not stick around long enough to be worth it. Always pick Leon first, then give them to Ashley afterwards. If you want to save both your health and ammo, however, then there's a couple of things you can do to ensure that you're more prepared for the road ahead. Firstly, there's melee attacks Leon can do by staggering an enemy in different ways, like shooting them in the head or kneecapping them. Then before they recover, all you need to do is go up to them, press the action button, and wha-bam! Depending on how you stagger the enemy, you even get different animations for melee attacks, and they're all great for crowd control. Ashley used to have a friggin' suplex maneuver during her section in the North American GameCube release, though it was a bug that wasn't actually supposed to be there, so future versions have sadly patched it out. You can, however, enable it in the HD project, and it's tricky to get the enemy on their knees with the door, but it is hilarious to see once you pull it off. The other way to reserve resources is to use Leon's knife, which has gotten a significant upgrade since the classic days. It was always the worst weapon to use and really awkward to handle. Characters could run faster with it, which is better for speedrunning if you're into that sort of thing, but otherwise it's usually the first item you throw into the box once you found one. This time it has a much wider reach and does decent damage to gather a quick kill or two. It's useful for breaking crates and barrels containing extra supplies too, and on the rare occasion you might find a ow! Goddamn snake! Eat hand cannon, reptilian scum! But knocking an enemy down and swiping away with your knife is a brilliant method for early in the game when you're not given as much ammo, though it doesn't take too long to find yourself very well equipped. Part of that is because you can save yourself getting hurt by aiming at axes the villagers throw at you after pulling them right out of their ass, because I have no friggin' clue how they get them otherwise, but that means fewer first aid sprays and herbs used for healing. And you can also shoot any lit dynamite that's chucked, causing a massive explosion that's super satisfying to do when their buddies are surrounding them. Dead enemies also frequently leave item drops behind, including extra ammo, healing, and cash. Where does it all go? Well, since there are no item boxes in RE4, it instead goes to your new inventory in the shape of Leon's attaché case. No idea where he puts it exactly, but now you're able to store way more stuff than you ever could do in the older games. There is of course still a limit because items and weapons come in different sizes and you have to keep everything within the grid, otherwise you'll have to discard any items that you feel you don't need as much. This does mean you'll have to readjust everything in your inventory to ensure that you get the most out of your space, almost like a puzzle game in of itself. If that doesn't sound appealing to you, then you're really not gonna like the inventory management. But for me, I think it adds that extra layer of survival that once again I believe makes Resident Evil 4 stand out from other third-person shooters and isn't as vacuous as you might think. The rocket launcher does take up a hell of a lot of room, however, and intentionally so since you can only use it the once, but it does defeat a boss in one hit should you choose to use it there. Personally, I like to save it for Verdugo, Salazar's right-hand man, since you normally have to freeze him first before you can inflict damage, and it's kind of annoying. Salazar himself, like I said, is a complete pushover, so I feel it makes more sense to use the rocket launcher on this guy. But you might have heard me say earlier that one of the item drops you get from enemies is cash. Yes, there is indeed money in this game. Pesetas as a matter of fact, so the Spanish aren't quite up to date just yet in this game. But that thankfully doesn't take up any space in your inventory, and you can even locate various treasures throughout the game, some of which can also be combined to get more money out of it later if you hold out long enough. And they all go to this charismatic gentleman, the Merchant. He doesn't have a name, but it's always a sigh of relief once you reach him because you've been building up that sweet dough and now it's time to sell those treasures and give yourself some upgrades. Whether it's a more expanded case, new guns, or a treasure map to help you pinpoint where each treasure is. Guns can be tuned up on top of that to provide even more firepower, reload speed, or capacity. And by maxing them all out, there's one more perk you can buy for that gun that's pretty damn expensive, but it can often be worth it. Like the TMP machine gun causing more pain than ever, or the striker shotgun being able to carry 100 rounds at once, good lord. The TMP is no doubt one of my favorite weapons in RE4. I love a good machine gun in games and I've never done a playthrough without it, only getting better the more I upgrade it. The Red 9's pretty good too though for the amazing firepower it can get, but I also like the Blacktail that doesn't quite do as much damage in exchange for an outstanding fire rate, and the Striker is probably the best shotgun for me with how far it spreads at close distances and just how devastating it is to enemies. But man, I love the Merchant. He's such a great inclusion and charming as hell too, no matter how many times his lines are repeated. If I ever encountered him at a flea market, you bet your ass I'm gonna be buying something.
Or if you want to really challenge yourself, you can be a jerk and kill the Merchant with just one shot, not allowing him to show up throughout the rest of the game.
No amount of upgrades and weaponry are going to be enough to withstand the quick time events, however, and back in 2005 these were revolutionary, but nowadays they're nothing special at all, and in some cases they might even be a little intrusive. I remember thinking the Krauser knife fight was so cool back in the day, like this was a movie that became a video game, but now it goes on a bit too long for my liking, and the choreography slightly more stiff than I recall it looking. Getting older sucks sometimes. The quick time events as a whole are probably something else that's aged the least gracefully, and there's sadly plenty of them. But they're over pretty quickly, so don't let it ruin the whole game for you. Unlike past Resident Evil titles, 4 is broken up into 5 chapters containing up to 4 different segments, with the final chapter once they're all finished, and the pacing for the most part is very well done. I often forget where a chapter ends, and by the time I reach it I'm like, oh right, wow, that was faster than I remember. Though granted, that could again just be me having played this game far too many times, and also just breezing through the puzzles. These aren't going to rack your brains nearly as much as the classic games did. There's a couple that might make you scratch your head the first time, but once you know the best solutions for these puzzles, you'll probably be thinking, why did I not do this before? This door with the Los Illuminados logo, for example, all you need to do is press up, then left. This one with the pictures, 1, 2, 3, 4. And this sliding puzzle, put the middle piece in the correct spot, then move the other pieces in a circle. I felt so stupid once I found out about these, but it did speed things along. It's very clear that puzzles aren't really the center of attention this time around, though that's not to say all the combat sections are fantastic either. Chapter 5 is where the game sort of loses some players, and I can kinda understand why. It's competent enough, and the shooting's still great, but it's easily the most generic of the environments, and the only time I would say it feels more like a standard third-person shooter when we had so many interesting locales earlier in the game, especially Salazar's castle where you didn't know what was coming next. There are some standout moments, but not quite on the same level as before. The second to last chapter is literally just one big shootout to the final boss, and it does feel somewhat out of place, even for a more action-heavy Resident Evil like this. Speaking of bosses though, they've gotten a lot better as well. It is still mostly pumping them full of lead until they die, but now you have to aim more precisely at their weak spots, assuming you shoot the boss enough times to open it up, or simply be able to dodge their attacks well enough, and in the case of Verdugo, there's even a little puzzle solving in it. Much better than before, and something I didn't know until fairly recently was that Resident Evil 4 also has dynamic difficulty. So basically, the better you perform, the harder it gets, unless you're playing professional mode because you hate yourself. And part of the challenge comes from escorting Ashley. I honestly can't believe it's taken me this long to get here in the video. Ashley cannot take care of herself whatsoever. It is up to you, the player, to make sure she gets to the end safely, with her own small health meter on top of that, and she doesn't take many hits before she's dead. Making sure she stays alive is the aim of the game here while she's with you. And yeah, in 2005, this wasn't fun for anybody, especially with Ashley constantly
doing that.
Her screaming for help can happen pretty frequently if you're not paying attention, and it's also an instant game over if Ashley gets taken away to some other dimension that Leon inexplicably can't follow her into. However, I don't think Ashley is that much of an issue to deal with now compared to when this game first came out. Part of that argument is because she can be put in a dumpster on a few occasions so that she stays completely out of the way while you take care of the threats and call her out again when you're done. Granted, dumpsters aren't going to be an option a lot of the time, but Ashley will still get behind Leon when aiming his guns. I even like her doing this little yes motion whenever you kill someone. I think it only happens on these trams sadly, but it's a cute touch. Friendly fire does unfortunately exist, so you'll want to be careful you don't accidentally shoot Ashley yourself unless you got some seriously pent-up aggression with her. But this shouldn't be a problem as long as you keep her close. Though if you do sense some danger up ahead, you can press a button to tell her to wait and follow you when need be, making a comeback from Resident Evil 0. The only thing I would say really sucks when it comes to Ashley is that she seems to feel too entitled to climb down ladders, making Leon catch her every single time. That's just... why? Ashley is about as much of a ball and chain escort as you can get. But I wouldn't say the game is that frustrating or difficult with her around. And I guess at the very least she does help Leon on a few occasions by unlocking doors, raising a bridge to stop more Ganados coming, or having her own small portion of gameplay where she can yeet lanterns to burn the couple of enemies she can do so. Something that's pretty cool about this section outside of Ashley suplexing is that the HD project allows you to enable different camera angles that was originally only present in the Japanese version of RE4, harkening back to the older games. Why this didn't get released everywhere else, I really don't know. But better to do it unofficially than not at all, I suppose. Overall though, I wouldn't say Ashley is that much of a pain in the ass to keep around in 2023 than she was in 2005. I'd rather not have her get in the way at all, but I'm grateful she doesn't do it that consistently. Though I'm sure there are plenty of folks out there that still utterly despise her to this day.
So they didn't invite you back for the 6th game, huh?
No, they wanted Sherry Birkin instead, that tramp. That only now leads us to the bonus content you unlock by finishing the main story in all but the GameCube releases. Extra costumes are probably the most minor in the game. Choosing Special 1 when starting a new playthrough, Leon gets his old RCPD uniform back, which looks very fitting even for a Resident Evil game as different as this. Ashley's put in a pop star outfit that's about trashy enough to be suitable for a dumpster. And Ada for me tends to switch between her black combat gear that she also wears in Assignment Ada, and her original dress from RE2. Is it just random, or am I missing something here? Picking Special 2 gives Leon the gangster setup, which is pretty silly, but using the Chicago typewriter on Ganados makes you feel like you're part of the Mafia and here to collect some payments. And Ashley perhaps gets the best one of all, the suit of armor. It looks utterly absurd on her, but with this on, she's basically invincible. Enemies can't pick her up because she's too heavy, and Leon can't accidentally shoot her either. It's great for going through professional mode if you don't want to worry so much about keeping Ashley safe, assuming you can put up with the constant clanging that happens whenever she moves. Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't do it. Thank God the HD project allows me to turn that off too. Also, I love this little detail of Leon holding his sides as he catches Ashley. Capcom really didn't need to do this much with the Easter eggs and optional cutscenes, but I'm very glad they did. It just makes the game more charming than it already is. The Ada side chapters have a little more significance than simple costumes, though. First up is Assignment Ada, where she has to gather 5 Las Plagas samples to take to Wesker. This one's not very long at all, only takes about half an hour to clear, and you've got unlimited continues and checkpoints, so it's only a matter of finishing it before you stop. Ada moves a little bit faster than Leon, which is pretty nice, but she isn't much different otherwise, and your weapon loadout is preset. Though there's more than enough ammo and drops to get you by, including the completely out of nowhere boss fight against Krauser. So you get the samples, Wesker's pleased for the time being, and that brings us to the much meatier Ada campaign, Separate Ways. This time you're basically going through some of the same parts as Leon did, but from Ada's perspective. Separate Ways goes on for around 3 hours and allows Ada to search for treasures and buy weapons and items from the merchant, which Assignment Ada wouldn't let you do before, but you sadly can't upgrade them anymore. They already have stats set up for you. This mode once again has Ada getting a Las Plagas sample for Wesker to tie it all into the main story and to some extent the series continuity, before she gives it to her real employers, and man do these cutscenes look hella rough today. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, both of Ada's chapters were originally PS2 exclusives, but the cutscenes in that version were all FMVs and not in real time due to hardware limitations, so that means no matter the version, you're looking at blown up FMV cutscenes for modern TVs, and it is so fuzzy and grainy and unlike the rest of the game. Higher quality textures are thankfully used during the campaign itself, but yeah, the rest of it's not pretty. Separate Ways overall can be a fun time and a good way to kill a few hours if you wanted more out of Resident Evil 4, but it doesn't have nearly the same amount of replayability as the core game. The lack of upgrades is one reason, and the fact that you're traversing some familiar territory, but Ada does have a few exclusive areas to herself, like having a fight on a battleship, which is kinda cool, as well as a new boss fight against Sadler. And in terms of weapons, she probably has the most useful bowgun in the series so far, with a fair amount of explosive arrows. However, I don't feel it's quite enough to get me to go through the campaign again, even with the Chicago typewriter being available upon finishing it. I'll stick with Leon's story and keep fine-tuning my guns as much as I can. Lastly, for extra game modes, we have the returning mercenaries. Same as before, the goal is to rack up as many points as you can by killing hordes of enemies, and in this game you can extend your time a bit more by grabbing these hourglasses, and in treasure chests selectively placed on the map, you can get a temporary bonus to rack up even more points. There's an overall amount of 4 stages to choose from, and surviving until the end will give you a star rating, with 60,000 points being needed to get 5 stars. Acquiring 4 stars in a stage will unlock more characters to play as. You've got Ada Wong, Jack Krauser, returning mercenary Hunk, and finally Albert Wesker, each with their own abilities that honestly make Leon almost obsolete. Unlockable characters were a thing in previous Mercenaries modes, but as far as I'm aware, there wasn't much distinction between them all. Every character in RE4's Mercenaries mode not only have different weapon loadouts, but they each have a little something extra to make them more fun to play as. Ada, as I brought up before, has a slightly faster running speed than the others, and as well as a handgun, she comes equipped with a TMP and semi-auto sniper rifle with an incredible firing rate, so she's great for long distances. Krauser easily makes up for his blandness by having a bow that's guaranteed to pop an enemy's head clean off and can also break shields with one arrow, but the big advantage he has is his infected arm that slices through anybody in a single hit, even mini-bosses that really love to wreck your score in this mode. It needs a recharge afterwards, and outside of grenades, the bow's all Krauser has for weapons, but that's more than enough to help him survive. Hunk is actually pretty good too. Despite only carrying the TMP as his weapon, all ammo drops are going to be for the TMP, so he can splash bullets like a madman and get by incredibly well, in addition to his CQC skills like snapping an enemy's neck. I have a hard time picking which one I like more between Hunk and Krauser. I've gotten some pretty high scores with both of them, but Wesker's also really enjoyable to play as. He has a ton of grenades to choose from, on top of a silenced pistol and semi-auto sniper just like Ada, but he's also the only character in Mercenaries that comes with a powerful magnum, and my god is his force push deadly. He's punching bad guys like Peter Parker does the Flash in the first Raimi Spider-Man movie. All of these extra characters are super fun to control in their own way, but Leon's sadly the ugly duckling in this raft. He's supposed to be the most balanced in the lineup, but he ends up feeling more bare bones compared to the rest if anything. His shotgun's pretty amazing, I can get him through the stages no problem, but Leon's definitely the least entertaining to play as overall, and no doubt the hardest to get 5-star rankings on, especially stage 4 that has 2 really pissed off Super Salvadors with a double-bladed sparking chainsaw. This was easily the most difficult stage of the lot, and it sucks so bad as a whole when you're so close to reaching 60,000 points, only to be met with a mini-boss that kills you instantly. I don't usually spend so much time on mercenaries, just never really been my thing, but I ended up doing 5 hours this go around. Not only because I was actually having some fun, but getting 5 stars on every stage with every character offers an amazing reward in the form of the hand cannon. A ludicrously powerful magnum where the base version's already absurdly dangerous to its opposers, and also has some exclusive ammo for it, but it can be made even better by purchasing upgrades including infinite ammo, and when it's fully maxed out, it's so overkill it ain't even funny. Why stop there though? Beat the game on professional mode and you get the PRL 412, or is it pronounced the Peril 412? Anyway, it's a gun that fires frickin' lasers when fully charged and has homing properties, no need for aiming whatsoever, and usually kills enemies in a single hit. The ultimate reward for going above and beyond and proving you have no life. And that includes me. 150 videos later, and for the first time in my life, I actually completed this game 100%. My Steam clock does not lie, I really did invest at least 40 hours into this version. I got everything within 3 whole playthroughs, gathering the Peril 412, the hand cannon, the infinite rocket launcher, the Chicago typewriter that also has unlimited ammo. With some spare money, I invested into Matilda, which I think is supposed to be a Leon the Professional reference, but it's a decent handgun that fires 3-round bursts, making for an alright alternative to some of the more powerful guns you can unlock. I got all of that, and I did those optional target practice missions that give you pointless bottle caps with characters on them, but some sweet moolah if you fill in a row. I think that should give you more than a reasonable idea as to how much I absolutely love Resident Evil 4. No matter how many times I go through it, I never get bored with the combat and the ridiculous as hell story and dialogue that goes along with it, in addition to the graphics that still look as good now as they did back then. It's what made me the Resident Evil fan that I am now, convincing me to try out past titles and anything else Capcom has up their sleeves in the future with this series. I know there's a part of the fan base that really did not like the direction Resident Evil 4 was going and would prove to be a huge influence for Resident Evils 5 and 6, but if games like the first and second remakes didn't quite appeal to you, then I'm sure Resident Evil 4 is more of what you're looking for with its faster paced action while not totally sacrificing tension. My younger brother Jude, for instance, is not that big a fan of the classic titles, but greatly enjoyed Resident Evil 4, that's how awesome it is. There's no ranking system at the end either, unlike most other games, meaning that newcomers can simply enjoy themselves without having to worry about being the best or fastest. And with so many ways to play Resident Evil 4, and inexpensively too, I urge anyone who somehow has not played it yet to please do so. It's one of the best games of all time and one of my personal favorites that I still come back to 18 years later, and will undoubtedly return many times more, most likely on one of my other umpteen different versions. It's just a really damn fun game, what more can I say about it? I've been gushing for like 50 minutes here, so yeah, buy it, please. I don't care which platform, just go and play it. It's a highly entertaining joyride that I wish never ended, and I want to know if this also gave you the motivation to have a crack at the older games.
Man, if I smoked at all, this would be the point where I'd be lighting up a cigarette after having an amazing time. And we're still not quite done with Resident Evil 4 just yet, because we have the remake to cover next. Yeah, I definitely didn't want to talk about this and the original in one video. It would have been way too long, and I dare say the review for this one won't be as lengthy as the review we're currently on. But thank you anyway for watching me praise Resident Evil 4 to the high heavens, and hope to see you soon. Well, anyway, with all said and done, thanks very much for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, and take care of yourself. Oh, good God, woman, how do you keep finding yourself in danger? Resident Evil 4 is not only the game that greatly... Resident Evil 4 is not only the game that... Did it again. Resident Evil 4 is not only the game that I can't get that one for some reason. Oh my God, we just... Ow. I bit my tongue. Ouch.